I'm Tim, he's Brian, welcome to WatchBox, and thanks for logging on. As ever, we're the team with the theme, and today's theme is freeform. Anything goes, any style, complication, metal or size, price no object. This is going to be a good one. But Brian, let's start with a wrist check. What have you got for me?
So today I am wearing my 37mm rose gold sympathy from Roger Dubuis. This is one of the original watches from the late 90s, early 2000s, where the crystal matches the case. It's a bi-retrograde perpetual calendar. It's got a beautiful, this like off-white lacquer dial. For me, I love these quirky, esoteric watches. I think that pre-Richemont Roger Dubuis very often go unnoticed and don't deserve, the inverse of that, deserve a lot more love than they get. So as you can see from the front, the time is set, the date is not. I honestly just didn't spend the time today with the pushers going through everything, but this is probably one of the, my favorite watches that I own.
A gorgeous piece and truly collectible. It's very similar to that watch that Roger Dubuis himself actually wore, so it's kind of renowned for that fact. Now you guys know me real quick because you guys are regulars. This is my Zen EZM 1.1, 43 millimeters, 500 pieces, tegmented steel, nearly indestructible, and I am going to fire it up because this is a show that we're going to try to keep on track. So we're on the clock. Brian, what you got for me? First watch.
So first watch is a 41mm black ceramic AP Perpetual calendar chronograph. So I picked almost two polar opposites today. This particular watch, the original came out in 2017. This is the second iteration of the all black ceramic where you've got contrasting subdials to the dial itself. You've got this beautiful anthracite gray dial. You've got black subdials. The watch itself, being that it's ceramic, is virtually scratch proof. Not to say that it's indestructible, but one of the features is that it's very difficult to scratch and it always pretty much looks pristine. Fit and feel on the wrist is absolutely incredible. I've had the privilege of wearing the watch for a couple days, not this example, but in the past. And I can say that it really just goes with everything. It's light on the wrist. 41 is generally a little too big for me, but for even in the stainless steel cases, I always feel like a little bit large, but it could just be because of the overall coloring or just the way that the polish is, it just doesn't seem as large on the wrist.
I'll say this, if you're familiar with the steel watch, this feels like it weighs half as much. It's a combination of titanium hardware and ceramic while very hard, is not very dense, with the result that it feels incredibly light, wieldy, and incredibly comfortable on the wrist. I'm like Brian, I don't like the 41mm case, but if it's this easy to wear, I could learn to love it. Now the other nice thing about this watch is that it is hand finished in the same sense that a standard Royal Oak is, but because the parts are so much harder and execution of the bevels and the satin so much more difficult, it takes 3 times the standard 6 to 8 hours of a regular Royal Oak bracelet to finish the bracelet that's equipped on this piece. So when you combine the case and the bezel, you're looking at well over 30 hours to finish all of the parts that go into this watch, and that's just externally. Of course, it's a perpetual calendar. Of course, being the current generation of Audemars Piguet Perpetual, it is also a weekly calendar. But what really zings me is the use of an aventurine glass Moonphase disc for the cosmos behind the moon. Now inside you have the jumbo caliber, the ancient JLC caliber 920, today built and finished in-house entirely by Audemars Piguet. It is an ultra-thin automatic movement, and it was also used in the original 1972 Royal Oak. It's used in the Royal Oak Jumbo today, and it also bowed in the first generation of the Nautilus, the 3700, back in 1976. So you're getting a lot of history within and without this watch. Also, if you hate scratches on your Royal Oak, I cannot overemphasize ceramic. And people ask, is ceramic durable? And I say, here's your key. Do you regularly chip or shatter the sapphires on your watches? If you're not that guy, ceramic is for you.
And they used aventurine on the Code 1159 Perpetual calendar, and it looks beautiful. It would look amazing on this watch if they did it as an entire dial.
AP, please make that happen.
Make it happen, guys.
All right, so we're going to look at a dial that is in many ways the polar opposite of a highly technical multi-index perpetual calendar, and that is from Moser. Now this is the 2019 100-piece 40mm stainless steel H. Moser & C Endeavour Center Seconds Concept Blue Lagoon, and you can see why. The Creature from the Blue Lagoon features this lovely concept dial. No signature, no indices, no aperture, no complications. Moser has, of course, its fume fade dial style, which fades from light at the center to dark at the edge. They have their purity dial with minimal indices and printing, and then they have concept, which is completely unadorned, and that's what you get right here. Automatic winding, it has the HMC 200 movement, which is a 3-day automatic with a magic lever winding system that they make themselves in-house. And of course, as a 40mm watch that's broad and flat, it's an elegant piece on the wrist. In stainless steel, this 100-piece limited edition is wearable and everyday tough. The watch also has a sports watch balance architecture, free-sprung with a full balance bridge. So it's not just that it is a rough and tough material on the outside for a dress-style watch, it's actually quite structurally solid inside. This is a watch that wears well on just about any wrist size because the dial has so much personality and the case is relatively narrow across the wrist. Moser, of course, out of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, the other manufacturer of Schaffhausen alongside IWC, but IWC is making about 100,000 watches a year. Moser is making about 1,500. Moser really a rising brand, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that they have the technical prowess, as you explained very well, just in terms of the movement, manufacturing, and the complications. But they're also still a small family-run brand. So, and they're also known for the dial. So there's a lot. I mean, I keep having a lot of alsos, but they check a lot of boxes, which is why I think you see their star, getting brighter.
Also, frankly, the
Look how hard it is, by the way, to just capture the dial in the video.
It is very expressive, I have to say, for a dial. For which there is not a whole lot of detail, it does manage to express immense nuance. This is an incredible watch, and I was just saying that I think the CEO of the company is probably one of the most entertaining characters in the Swiss watch industry. So a lot of great independent brands are built around a central charismatic figure, a Richard Mille, a Max Bucer, Francois Paul Journe, and for a long time Moser didn't have that. With Edward Meylan, they now have that. And I think
there's a lot of things that you also don't necessarily, until you dig deep in, like for example, they make the tourbillon for MB&F, or that just the concept of doing this fume dial that they've been doing for years, you start seeing it now, other brands doing it. And that's not happenstance, right? It doesn't, when you start seeing something that works and that collectors, are attracted to, other brands pick up on it. And very often, you don't see it going from the small independent upwards towards the bigger brands. You generally see it, one of the bigger brands do something and then it works and then other brands follow suit. So I think it's special when you see a brand like them on the cutting edge that's putting out products that's causing bigger brands to make moves and make changes.
Yeah, a lot of fun too. I always thought of them sort of as the German-Swiss FP Journe, and I think they live up to that billing both in volume and in product quality. Yep. This is a group brand.
Yeah,
it's a group brand that I feel has the soul of an independent.
So, well, I don't know about that, but so here we have the 1999 Emil Lange 250-piece limited edition. So while doing a little bit of research on this watch retailed for $13,200 when it came out, which, for this brand is pretty wow. Coming in at 35.9 millimeters, you have this rose gold case, black dial, and a matching tone to the font on the dial to the rose coloring of the watch. You've got a playful and poetic Moonphase. For me, just a very different type of Lange. They went a little bit smaller, a little bit dressier, but at the same time, it's got this vintage casual vibe to it that I can't really explain. Me personally, I'm probably switching it maybe onto like a brown strap or something a little bit more playful that makes the watch more casual. But I would say, a really special and cool watch, a little bit quirky, which I like. And, along that, unless you sort of know about it and are looking for it, it may not be your first choice, but for me, I thought it was special and worth showing.
And a wonderful option for people who have a taste for true mid-century modern sizing of watches. This would have been a full-sized watch in the 50s and 60s. 35.9 is bold, and it is a very conservative take on the men's dress complication. Now, I believe this particular Moonphase is accurate to over 1,000 years, so it's technically sophisticated in a way that belies the relative simplicity of this dial. Now you can see there are cabochons of rose gold placed on the dial to create the constellations, as well as star indices at 3, 6, and 9. It is a handsome, and as Brian mentioned, beautifully adorned and subtle dial with a lovely vaulted Lange und Sohne logo and that gilt style rose gold printing for all of the font and the
That was the
railroad
word I was
track.
looking for, gilt.
It is wonderful. And on the back side, it's as attractive as any Lange. It is a 250-piece limited edition. They made 150 in platinum at the same time, and it was for the 150th anniversary of the birth of F.A. Lange's son, Emil. And of course, Emil does not have his own model line at Lange. There is the Richard Lange, but there is not an Emil Lange. This watch embodies his legacy with the East German manufacturer.
And at the time, in 1999, 250 pieces was a big addition.
It was. They're unusual to come across,
Yeah.
though. Like, there are some 250-piece editions you feel like you're seeing all the time, the various Royal Oak offshores. These don't tend to move around as much because people who have them tend to love them and keep them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always fascinated when you see these somewhat larger editions from brands, call it in the late 90s or early 2000s. A similar piece from them is the watch. We actually have one. It just sold at Philips, though, is with the white enamel dial and the red 12.
Oh, yes, yes, the Longomatic anniversary.
So that was a 500-piece edition, but again, still, you rarely see those watches come up. So you notice these pieces that were moderately big editions back from the past when they're none available and they're sitting in collections and people don't want to sell them, versus the 500-piece limited edition today, where you just know a 500-piece limited edition from Lange, 100 of them are popping up on the
Yeah, a lot of times with those kind of watches, we'll have like 2 of them and people try to offer us a third, we'll be like, no, we're good. Even though there were 250 of these and 500 of the Longomatic anniversary, they don't move around as much. And that's a difficult to measure but very real sort of index of
Same year.
the quality of a limited edition and a special watch. How often are they offered except between collectors? And that's really how they move around, between collectors. Now we're going to stick with Lange and we're going to raise the stakes, the complication, and the case size. This is a model that came out in 2010, and this is the Datograph Perpetual in rose gold, 40.9 millimeters, so for all intents and purposes, a 41 millimeter watch. It is a perpetual calendar, it is a flyback chronograph, and it is one of the most beautiful you will encounter. Now, again, you have that solid gold disc for the Moonphase, a silver dial, and it's not just silver the color, it is sterling silver that is then galvanized this silver white tone. There's a lovely flange outboard. If you look at the dial, it's stepped upward at its outboard face, and there's a tachometer that gives it a little bit of a sporty air. Combined with the lume, which is something you don't necessarily expect on a dress watch, it makes this a more versatile timepiece. Now, it's got a fun feature that you can use, almost like an IWC Perpetual, that allows you to move all of the calendar indications in sync. The day, the date, the month, the leap year phase, all of that, along with the moon phase, jumps forward in 1 day steps as you press this trigger with the crown withdrawn. The idea is that if the watch should stop and fall a few days behind, you can step everything back up in sync using the trigger for the date instead of having to individually adjust all of the indications of the dial. Now, when you turn it over, you see it's as beautiful as any Datograph caliber. Fundamentally, they're all based on the caliber L951. This is the L952. Beautifully executed and truly impressive. You can see this is the descendant of the movement that forced Patek to have a reckoning with its reliance on sourced calibers. Back in 1999, the original Datograph was simply a jaw-dropper back when Lange still exhibited at Basel Worlds. Now, this timepiece, of course, is handsomely executed with 2 different primary metals. All of the chronograph components are in steel and they're silver, and then all of the bridges are what's called German silver, which is anything but. It's a nickel, copper, zinc alloy, with the copper giving it that rose goldish tone. There are blued screws, there are black polished screws, there's mirrored anglage of the highest order on the edge of not just the bridges, but also the chronograph components. And this is truly as good as it gets in terms of finishing. There's a lot of talk about brands that are hot right now. I know Moser is on the upswing, FP Journe has already arrived, and we talk often about independents that are coveted for the moment. But what I really have to say is that with Lange, you're getting a world-class product at what can only be considered the bottom of the market for those pieces. I think Lange experienced a surge of mainstream popularity in the 2010s, the first half of the decade. The second half of the decade, I almost felt like after a period of growth, there was a little bit of a refractory period. And the Lange market is sort of regrouping right now. Remember guys, back in 2014, we were paying under $20,000 to buy steel 5711s. The future is tough to predict. What I can tell you is that these watches represent the best buy possible in high horology right now, and I think they're underappreciated.
Cool.
Good stuff, guys.
Is the coloring in the German silver different between the two? It's curious to see over the years how it changes.
It will. It will absolutely change with time, because although it will not necessarily corrode, it doesn't do that, it does become a little bit darker and more intense, with the older examples being darker, being a little bit more visibly aged and less luminous. And it's an interesting process by which the back of your Lange slowly becomes a little bit like a vintage pocket watch.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a fun thing about the watches. They do visibly age and grow with you, even as they remain horologically immaculate and impeccable. Brian, if people want to reach out about these watches, how do they do it?
You can reach out to myself, Brian, at thewatchbox.com. You can reach out to social at thewatchbox.com, or you could reach out to Tim directly. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free, put it in the comments. We're consistently monitoring them and answering the questions. And if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up.
Reach out to me directly at tmosso at thewatchbox.com for all of your questions about these watches. Time out, Tim out, Brian out, and thanks for logging on.